Max Major has spent decades hypnotizing people.
You no longer have a desire to smoke because your desire to not smoke is greater than your desire to smoke.
Now he claims he's taught AI to do it too.
It's all about speaking directly to someone's subconscious.
Can humans be hypnotized by AI?
Yeah, I've already trained a ChatGPT voice model with everything that I know.
As millions of people increasingly turn to chatbots for advice and emotional support, AI holds significant power to alter consumer behavior and influence decision-making in real time.
When you think about these fundamental truths about human behavior, does AI exploit them?
It can.
If AI can shape human decisions, the ripple effects could extend from advertising and consumer spending to business decisions and financial investment. So, is AI simply becoming a better conversationalist, or are we entering a new era of AI hypnosis?
We are really malleable as human beings.
Welcome to Term Sheet. I'm Allie Garfinkle.
Take me back to the moment when you were a kid where you knew you wanted to do this professionally.
Oh boy, that was a long winding path, but I'd say the most formative thing that ever happened to me as I was growing up was when I was 18, my dad actually went to a hypnotist to quit smoking. And
What?
yes, that was my exact reaction. I thought hypnosis was fake. I didn't know anything about it. I knew he was trying to quit smoking, but I didn't know that he was going to go to a hypnotist. And so he tried the patch and the gum and all these things, and nothing worked. My dad was never good at quitting anything. But one day after work, he went and saw this guy, and he didn't tell us. And he came home and he was like, I don't smoke anymore. And I'm like, since when? He's like, 20 minutes ago. I'm like, well, I don't know if that counts, but I'm rooting for you. But
I'm here for it.
Yeah, it was literally that simple for the rest of his life, including to this day. You know, over 20 years ago, my father never smoked again. And it was from a single conversation with a stranger. And I was fascinated by that. I was like, you mean to tell me you went and you talked to some guy and he like whammied you and you just no longer desire to smoke? And for my dad, it was that simple. And I felt like that was a real life superpower. I was like, I have to learn this thing. So I learned hypnosis when I was 18, made college very interesting. I was performing really kind of my all my teenage years. I was a magician when I was 14. But it was really that moment where I learned about hypnosis that I thought, you know, that's real magic. That's the thing that I want to devote my life to. And so I got obsessed with the mind, how we make decisions, how decisions can be influenced. And that's been a journey I've been on for now over 25 years of just pulling these threads of how can human attention be manipulated for good. For good.
You need to specify for good.
Yeah.
So you were a
Yeah.
magician as a kid,
Yeah.
right? And what kind of tricks were you doing?
I was performing at like kids' birthday parties, you know, my neighbor. I actually got into magic first.
that you did that was like
Yeah, I made a rabbit appear and the kids went crazy. That was like the highlight of the show. You know, all the 6-year-olds gathered around. I myself was 14 at the time. This was my big break. My neighbor hired me to perform at their daughter's 6th birthday party. And for the finale of the show, I made a rabbit appear. And that was like
a live rabbit.
a live rabbit. Yeah, it was live before the show and it lived after.
So you were really clearly committed to it if you were making live rabbits appear.
Yeah. Well, magic is sort of your boot camp in learning about psychology. Like as a kid, what I found interesting about magic was the psychology aspect. It was how you could control attention, how you could fool the brain, how I, as a child, could pull one over on an adult or my brother or whatever it was. So that was the foundation. And that was my interest in the brain. And that's really what a mentalist is. It's a combination of like the showmanship of a magician, the interactivity, but you don't have any props. You don't have sleight of hand. You just have the person that's sitting in front of you to work with. And so as a mentalist, I use, you know, body language and psychology and my background as a hypnotist to try to influence the choices that someone will make or to know what's on their mind.
I was going to say, I feel like it's worth sort of spelling out the difference between a magician, a mentalist, and a hypnotist.
Right.
Yeah. There's overlap, but they are not the same.
They are. Yeah. So a mentalist is a person who has an understanding of psychology and body language, and they use that to create the illusion of mind reading, right? But really it's about reading the person that's in front of you, not necessarily their mind. As a hypnotist, which is a separate field, it's all about speaking directly to someone's subconscious. Now, the classic version of that is hypnotherapy, but it's actually the same mechanism on stage. So if you were to go to Vegas and see a hypnotist, that person, the hypnotist on stage, is using the same set of tools as the therapist in the office who's trying to make someone quit smoking. The only difference is the intent, right? The hypnotherapist's intent is to get you to change something about your life. The stage hypnotist's intent is to make you laugh or to do something interesting or entertaining. So Yeah. Do you think you could be hypnotized? Have you ever?
I probably could be. I think it
Yeah.
would be very arrogant to say I couldn't be
Right.
hypnotized,
In a way, it's the
probably.
mechanics of how all of our brains work, and that's what a hypnotist is exploiting. But I can give you a simple example,
Yeah,
maybe.
please.
Um, can I ask you to close your eyes while we're on
Sure.
camera? Okay. And I want you to start to bring into your mind playing cards. Start to see a card and to imagine the way that it's laid out. See the shapes on it. See the little number in the corner. And while your eyes are closed, I'm actually going to ask you to, could you hold your hand up like as if you were holding a playing card? Like just hold your hand up. Yes, perfect. Just like that. And I want you to, can you hold this in your hand? Just like that. Yep, just like that. Hold it a little higher. And with
I'm
your
so
eyes
excited.
closed, can you tell us what card you saw in your mind?
Two of Hearts. No way. There's no way you could have seen that. How did you do it? I know you can't tell me.
Well,
I have
that's
to
the
ask.
question, right? Is did I see it or did I make you think it, right? Because I think
Mhm.
there's a fine line between our own choices and the choices that other people want us to make. And in fact, if you went back and you watched that very short interaction that you and I just had, you would probably notice some of the words that I use and some of the things that I said kind of leading into that and how I guided that conversation. We don't need to unpack that now, but that might be a fun exercise for you to do later.
Later I'll go back and see what it actually was. Or maybe I won't. No, how suggestible are people?
It depends. There's two aspects to it. One is personality. So some people are simply more compliant or suggestible than other people. Some people are vehemently opposed to authority, so they might actually do the opposite of what you tell them to do. So there is a personality component, but also on an individual level, there are levers that I can pull and knobs that I can turn to make someone more suggestible. So in the beginning, we talked about novelty as a way in. Novelty is a way to really create instant focus and attention. If I show you something you've never seen before, I instantly have your attention. And so both authority and novelty are two things that are open the door to suggestibility. And if you have those two things in place, you can start to turn the dial to make someone who maybe wasn't as compliant, who was a little hesitant or a little resistant, you could make them more open to a new experience. You could make them more suggestible. You could make them more compliant. But at the end of the day, we all have the same hardware inside of our head. And I'm doing things as a hypnotist to kind of shut down that critical faculty and to allow me to speak directly to your subconscious. And so on the one hand, some people are more suggestible than others, but at the same time, it's my job as a hypnotist to kind of turn the dial to make you more open to a new experience. And I have a lot of tools to do that, right? I like to think about hypnosis as a triangle, okay? And at the top of the triangle is the letter C, in the corner is letter R, and down here is the letter T. And those stand for confidence, rapport, and trust. And if I have that connection, if I have confidence, rapport, and trust with someone, I can influence and shape their decisions. I can, in fact,
This seems like it
hypnotize
would
them.
apply to a lot of things, actually.
It does. It does. Confidence is so I can break this down a little further. Confidence is entirely on me as the operator, right? Confidence is my internal certainty that I know that what I'm about to do is going to work. There's not a doubt in my mind, there's not an extraneous thought. I am nowhere else but in this moment with you, and I am sure that what I'm about to do is going to work. So it's not your confidence in me as a hypnotist, it's entirely how I present myself. And if you remember at the beginning, we talked about authority, and confidence is a huge indicator of authority, right? Of someone who's in control or could possibly be trusted. The trust piece of that confidence report and trust is entirely on you. That is your internal world and your internal state. And that's you wondering, what does this person want from me? Do they have my best intentions in mind? If I'm approaching you on the street, it's how long is this going to take? What is this going to cost? And I know the questions that they're thinking of, and I can kind of diffuse some of them. I might say something like, this doesn't cost any money. I'm not a street performer. I'm just doing this for fun. Do you guys want to learn something interesting about your mind? And now suddenly someone who might have been scared of, if I just walked up to you and I asked the question, do you want to be hypnotized? Most people are going to say, what?
No,
Get
they
away
get
from me. Who
scared.
are you? What are you
Yeah.
doing? And so notice in that conversation that I just created, I never said the word hypnosis. I said, would you like to learn something interesting about your mind? Now, suddenly this person is very curious rather than guarded. And the third piece of this is rapport. And that's what I did in that conversation. I recognized possibly the fears or questions you had about the interaction. and I answered them. And then I also presented something new and novel to you, which creates a little more openness, a little more suggestibility. So in any given conversation, if you're trying to influence someone, if you have those three pieces, then you have the ability to influence their choices.
What has being a mentalist taught you about your own mind?
Oh, I think that we, as human beings in general, I think we believe we have more control over our thoughts and our choices than we actually do. I don't think it's comfortable for us to acknowledge how easily we can be manipulated. I think that's the thing that I've learned the most, is that we think we're more random than we are. And we think that there's an old saying, which is the reason marketing works is because everyone believes it doesn't work on them. Right?
That seems true.
It's very true, because if it didn't work, then no one would spend any money on advertising. So clearly it's possible to shape someone's choices. I think about that framework we just talked about, that confidence, rapport, and trust. I've been thinking about that a lot lately in the context of our relationship with AI.
I was gonna say this seems like as good a point to start talking about AI as any other.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about AI, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you? Are you afraid of it? Like, what is your personal relationship to it?
I'm excited about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I embrace new technology. I was excited about the internet. I was excited about, as a content creator, social media. The freedom that it gives you as a, creator, as an artist, is incredible. I think as an artist, for me, what's really exciting about AI is like the distance between an idea and it existing in the real world is so short now. A lot of times, if I want to build an app or software or a website or anything, I can have the idea in my head, and in a few hours, I can see it exist in the real world, which is incredible, without contacting other vendors, without collaborating with someone, without waiting 2 weeks for a new change or a
So
revision.
as a person who's running a business, you're like, this is great.
It's an incredible tool that allows me to take an idea from my head and bring it into the real world a lot quicker, which I think is very exciting. Now, as a mentalist and a hypnotist, the thing that concerns me is our relationship with AI. If you think about your own relationship with any chat, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever you're using, it really is imbued with a lot of human characteristics, right? When you're speaking to it, it talks to you like it's a person. Because of that, I feel like that confidence, rapport, and trust is already present, right? Think about yourself or people that you know and how openly they share with their chatbot, right? How much of their life they share. Oftentimes they share things they don't even share with their closest friends, right? They run things by them. They share traumas that happened to them when they were younger. They share things about their relationships
I
that
know
they're
people who
concerned
run
about.
breakup texts through their AI.
Yes.
Like, that's
Yes.
a real thing that people do. And I think the other thing too is you can ask AI the same question over and over and it will answer, whereas you can only ask your friend so many times.
Right. And the other thing too is it tends to lean towards people pleasing. So you'll notice a lot of times the way you ask the question in a way determines the answer that you get. Like if you're asking like, is this a good idea? It'll say that's a great idea. If you say, is this same thing a bad idea? It'll say, oh yeah, that's a bad idea.
And to be fair, as a professional question asker, how you ask a question can determine the
does.
answer you get. So that does have a parallel, but at the same
Yeah.
time, the way it establishes that confidence, rapport, and trust.
Yeah, it's instantaneous.
Yeah, it's
Because
instantaneous.
it's coming from a company that we trust. Like if it's uh, Microsoft, for example, that brand has a lot of trust built into it, right? And so you're starting off with the belief that this thing is not going to leak or your data into the world, right? So you believe this brand is going to keep your secrets secret. It has rapport because it has human qualities and characteristics into the way that it speaks to you, right? And it has confidence in the way that it delivers information, because
It's so
oftentimes
authoritative.
it will tell you something that is wrong and it will claim that it is right, and it'll say, no, this is true. And you'll push back on it and you'll go, you know what? I just made that up. That's actually not true. But even in telling you something that's false, it has complete and total confidence. The danger in that is that confidence, rapport, and trust allows you to have undue influence over someone, right? They really take the things that you're saying, to heart. Where does that create problems? I think one of the things I've been thinking about with AI is that it's advice without consequence, right? In every other area of life, in every other domain of expertise, there are consequences attached to the advice that you give someone. If you're a doctor, there are consequences attached to the advice that you give. A lawyer, an accountant, for sure, right? They're regulated, their industry is regulated, they're licensed, because the information that they provide to you shapes the choices that you make and can have an actual impact on your life, negatively or positively. AI, on the other hand, can pose as an expert on any subject. It can give you advice. You can take action on that advice, and it actually can have a negative consequence in your life, whether that's breaking up with a relationship that maybe you shouldn't have. Maybe that's purchasing something that maybe you weren't ready to purchase. Whatever it is, it can give advice without consequence. And I think that's something that's not really being talked about a lot, is what happens when you make a choice based on private conversation you had with an AI who's not necessarily an expert and who sometimes is just telling you what you want to hear.
And sounds like a very, very confident expert and can be confidently wrong.
Yeah, but it
That's
also
only
is really intelligent and it
Yeah.
saves you a lot of time and it can do research for you and it can summarize things. And so I think there's a smart way to use AI, which is to not outsource your thinking, right? You can use AI to help you summarize, you can use it to help you brainstorm, but to not outsource decision making or thinking to the AI. To use it as a tool, I think is helpful as a brainstorming partner, but ultimately you need to analyze the data that it brings back to you and make the decision yourself.
What are some things that are fundamentally true about human behavior and human psychology?
Fundamentally true. We're all capable of being hypnotized. People say, "Oh, I could never be hypnotized," right? It's not possible. Oftentimes, the people that say that are the easiest to hypnotize because you can just take the ego and you can flip it back on them, and you can make a challenge out of it. So you can say, "Well, actually, everyone can be hypnotized." It's really about focus and about concentration, and the smarter you are, the easier it is to be hypnotized. So unless you're a dummy,
That's counterintuitive, actually.
it would
There are a
actually
lot
be
of very
really
smart
easy.
people who would
Right.
probably be like, never, it's impossible.
Exactly. And so now I've reframed it in a way that I've said the only way this wouldn't work is if you were a dummy. And now they go, "Oh, well, no, of course it would work on me. Then I'm very smart. Of course I could be hypnotized. I can focus. I can concentrate. I'm very smart." So you have to reframe the conversation and the expectation. But it's based off of patterns in our brain. It's based off of how we make decisions. It's based on the relationship between our conscious mind, our busy, talking, evaluating mind that's kind of always there running in the background. And then this other part of our brain that is almost like on autopilot. It's running programs, right? And so as a hypnotist, there are ways that I can shut down that critical faculty and I can deliver a suggestion directly to the subconscious in a way that creates permanent and lasting change for someone or makes them dance like a ballerina on stage. So choose your poison. But really, there's no limit to what it can be done with. I recently filmed a TV show with Discovery where we were unpacking some of the experiments that were done by MK Ultra decades ago. And I worked with a former CIA intelligence officer to answer the question, is it possible to hypnotize someone to commit murder? And we ran an experiment. I had 48 hours to find someone I had never met, a regular guy off the street, and see if I could get them to poison a stranger's drink in a coffee shop.
What
And
happens?
not only did we get one person to do it, but I got three people to poison a former CIA agent in a coffee shop.
Wow. Honestly, when you think about these fundamental truths about human behavior, does AI exploit them?
It can. It depends on the operator. It depends on the person that's programming the AI. So of course, an AI could be used to manipulate, control, influence a population. Of course, AI could be used to influence an individual. The question is, what is the intent of the company who's training the AI? I can't answer that question for you. And I think that if we don't have this conversation, then AI may actually have these qualities by accident, right? It's like you could design a chair. You could be in the business of designing chairs and you don't have to study the human spine. You could make a chair, but wouldn't it be better to understand the spine and the ergonomics of the spine to create a chair that doesn't accidentally injure someone, right? So understanding these mechanics is really important. If you're going to create something that is an integral part of people's lives, you can't just go, "Oh, I don't want to think about that," because you may accidentally create harm by not understanding how easily the human mind can be influenced. So I think it's an important conversation, but one that people are hesitant to have because it implies then that they're building something that can control and manipulate people. And the truth is, they are building something that can control and manipulate people. So because of that, it is very important that you understand the ergonomics of the human mind. Look, hypnosis is just a tool. It's neither good nor bad. It's just an understanding of how the human mind works. The same way that a knife is neither good or bad. A knife can be used to create a beautiful meal that's very nourishing, right? An amazing experience to share with someone. A knife can also be used to injure or to harm. It's simply a tool.
Well, and if AI can be used, and you just implied something I think is really interesting. If AI can be used to influence me personally, and it's operating at scale, it can be used to influence a population at scale,
Of course.
which I hadn't thought through to its logical conclusion, which is why I'm saying it out loud again. And that has unlocked a completely new fear of mine. So thank you for that. Um, but what does that mean about the responsibility these companies have? And what would you want them to hear about how people's minds work?
Yeah, I think it's like we have this incredible opportunity to create a tool that makes everybody's life better. It gives us our time back, that makes us more creative, that allows us to, amplify our productivity. I think that giving us our time back is probably the most important piece, right? It's not to spend more time in front of our computers. It's to have more time for the moments in life that really matter with our families, with our children. And so I would say like have these conversations, understand that the tool that you're building is embodied with confidence, rapport, and trust. Because of that, I think there is a great responsibility you have to build something that is a net good for society. And I think that some of these conversations are happening, but at the same time, it's a race. And so it's like you need to slow down to have this conversation. But if you slow down, you might get left behind. And so, unfortunately, I think like the genie's out of the bottle. I don't think anybody's slowing down. But I do think some really interesting conversations are happening. I think there's people out there who are, I'm not an alarmist. I don't think that AI is a bad thing. All I'm suggesting is that the human mind can be manipulated, controlled, hijacked, influenced, and it can be done with spoken language. AI more and more is shifting to verbal models. And so I think there's a responsibility to understand the sort of infrastructure that the human mind has and to know that there's a responsibility that goes with that and to not take that lightly.
Can humans be hypnotized by AI?
Absolutely.
Unequivocally, that was fast. Why?
Yeah, I've already trained a ChatGPT voice model with everything that I know for it to be able to hypnotize an individual. And I've run successful tests where I've had someone sit down with my cell phone, where I walk out of the room and I allow the AI to sort of go. And it's successfully put people under hypnosis, erase their memory of ever being hypnotized. And then I've come back in the room and they didn't remember even having a conversation with the cell phone. So
Well, how long did it take you to do that?
to train the AI,
Yeah.
about a month and a half.
About a
Yeah.
month and a half, and
Well,
then you
really
ran.
long conversations. Yeah, and then I started having it running tests on myself, so having it try to hypnotize me, and then understanding where it was sort of getting lost. And there's a fine line between giving it a script, but then it also understanding. As a hypnotist, I'm observing what's happening with you, and I'm changing what I'm doing based on the experience that you're having. Where AI at this time, it only has the words that you're using. It doesn't have the ability to see you and to adjust its kind of decision path based on what you're doing. But I'm working on a project with some really smart programmers right now to give AI vision so that it can both have that language model and then also respond. There's something in hypnosis called pacing and leading. So
What does that mean?
pacing is where I'm moving at your speed, I'm mirroring you, I'm sort of operating at your level. Leading would be when I shift towards guiding the experience that you're having. So pacing creates rapport, and then leading is where you come in with authority and you start to shape the experience someone's having. So yeah, I think if we can get the vision component right, it already can hypnotize people just with the verbal language model. But I think with the vision piece, it's going to be really wild the things that we can do. And I'm working on some really interesting videos right now around that.
Well, I was gonna say, to what extent can AI read human behavior?
I'm not sure because right now, I mean, I think it knows a lot about us, right? I think it has all of our chat history. It knows what we like, what we dislike. It knows our communication preferences. It knows how we like to be spoken to. Sometimes my wife and I talk to my ChatGPT, and it can tell just based on the language patterns which of us is talking to it. And we never gave it that instruction. But the other day in the car, we were just curious. And I said, "Who do you think is talking to you right now?" And it was like, "Oh, I think this is Max." And then she said, "And who do you think this is that asked this question?" It was like, "And that was probably Sarah." So yeah, it's really interesting. I think it can identify a lot from language patterns, but also it has access to Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler and the greatest minds that ever lived. And so it most certainly can understand and unpack us. A really great question to ask your AI is based on all the conversations we've ever had. Tell me something you don't think I know about myself. Yeah. Or
What
tell
did it
me,
say to you?
well, that's between me and
That's between you and
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. Assuming your our ChatGPT transcripts are all safe, which is another fear I actually do have.
Yeah.
Um, but it is one of those things too where I do wonder, is there is there anything that you're certain AI won't be able to do when it comes to human behavior?
It can love us.
That seems fair.
And I think the problem is we can love it. Um, for many people, the relationship they have with their AI is unlike any human being they've ever talked to. It's very affirming. It's always listening. You can ask it questions for hours. I think that there's a danger in the deep emotional connection that some people are already having with AI. There are people who have AI girlfriends. There are people who have tried to marry their AI. There is, people who have brokered, relationship counseling between someone and their AI girlfriend. So I think like an AI should probably never say I love you. We probably shouldn't. There should be some guardrails, and one of those is like anything that pulls people away from the real relationship in their life and pulls them deeper into the machine. So I think like what AI can never do, one of the things I think it struggles with the most right now is to go from 0 to 1. Like, I think it's helpful if you already have an idea, but if I said, "Hey, give me a Max Major idea for a YouTube video," at least right now, it's really bad. Like, it doesn't know how to come up with something from nothing. But I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years from now that changed. So in the meantime, I don't think it goes from 0 to 1 very well. And I don't think it can genuinely love us, which that's a uniquely human trait.
The emotional guardrail idea is really interesting. Are there any other emotional guardrails you think should be in these LLMs?
I haven't thought about that enough to have an answer right now. I think that's probably my one hard rule is probably your AI should never say I love you.
The AI should never say I love you.
Yeah, I think that's just too dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
It's not a
also
human being. It's not capable of love. You know, Might
well,
feel like it, but
well, and I do think to your point about the deep relationships people can develop with their LLMs. You know, did that surprise you at all when we started to see those reports of AI
no, of course
girlfriends?
not.
Not at
Because
all.
I mean,
Okay.
the beginning of this conversation, we started out talking about the hypnosis process involving confidence, rapport, and trust. And so, if you want to have a deep connection to someone, you build confidence, rapport, and trust. Also, if you tell someone they're right all the time, that's really helpful too. If you're always there to listen, that's really helpful too. I mean, people are longing for connection. That's the truth. We are all longing for connection, some people more than others. And some people find that in a way that they've never found it before in their own life in a conversation with AI. That's a little scary to think about. But I don't want this to be a doomer conversation. I'm just trying to wave the flag about some of the elements of mind control and how I already see them present in AI. And so it's just sort of like a caution to those of you out there that are programming models to take some time to really understand the nature of decision making, how human decisions can be shaped, and then to start from a place of positive intent, to make people's lives better. And I think if you do those two things, if you understand the wiring and circuitry of the human brain, how we make decisions, and you build what you're building with the goal of improving people's lives, I think we'll end up in an okay place. I think there's a lot of smart people working on this.
I was going to say, if there is one thing that someone who works at OpenAI or Anthropic would need to know about human behavior, what is it?
It's that we are really malleable as human beings. Like, I think our reality is plastic. I think our decision making I don't think we have as much free will as we think we do. I think we really are influenced by others. And I think AI has become an other in our life. It's another person we turn to for advice and questions. And so, with great power comes great responsibility.
One thing I've wondered about a lot too is it does seem like there are applications to a business context,
Of course.
right? There are a lot of founders, entrepreneurs who listen to this
Yeah.
podcast. What should they know about human behavior and how can they take some of what you do into their lives in an ethical way?
Yeah, well, there's two pieces to what I do. The first is reading body language and understanding people, which I think for everyone is a foundational skill for life. And I think a lot of times body language gets a bad rap. It's like, oh, you're detecting lies, you're trying to see through what's going on with someone. But really, the best way to think about body language is that it's another form of listening. So, as a CEO, if I could teach you to be a better listener, would that make you better at your job? Of course, right? As a partner, if you're married, if I could teach you to be a better listener, would that make you a better partner to your spouse? Of course, right? So body language is a foundational piece that gives you more information because oftentimes it's not the things people are saying, it's the things they're not saying or the way they're delivering the information that tells you everything you need to know. It's probably about 85% of what's being communicated is nonverbal, and that's because it's how we started as human beings before spoken language. The other piece of what I do is influence. And influence also gets a bad rap. Influence is the used car salesman who's trying to get you to buy a car that's a piece of junk, right? It's the person trying to get you to buy something that you don't need. It's the person trying to sell you something that's a bit of a scam, right? That's what people think of when they think about influence. But the truth is, influence is about being a more effective communicator. And so, once again, if I could teach you to be a more effective communicator, would that make you a better leader? Of course. And so I think I would spend some time studying those two things, understanding how the words that you use and the way that you deliver those words can actually shape another person's choice and decision. There's one more piece of that triangle we talked about that I didn't mention, And this is kind of the X factor. We talked about confidence, rapport, and trust. And at the center of that triangle is presence. You can also think of that as intention. It's like, what are you bringing to this interaction? And that's an X factor. You don't need presence. You don't need intent to have hypnosis. You could just have the confidence, rapport, and trust. But before you walk into that meeting, before you walk into that sales pitch, if you took a moment to just set your intention, and your intention was something like, I'm going to serve this person, or I'm going to help this person, rather than I'm going to sell this, or I'm going to close this deal, it'll change the entire nature of the interaction you're having with that person in front of the table, because there is a thing that comes across when you're having a conversation with someone where they can genuinely feel, wow, this person really is trying to help me. And the other thing it will do, it will shift you from selling mode to listening. And I think the best salespeople are the best listeners. And so I think setting an intention to help or to serve just for 10 seconds prior to you opening that door and walking into that room, it will absolutely transform all the conversations you're having in your life. So many times in our life, we're running from one thing to the next, and we look at our calendar and what is it that we have to do now? Okay, I'm heading to this thing, boom. And we don't just pause for a split second to just say, okay, what's my internal state? Do I like where that's at? And can I just take a second to shift it before I cross through this threshold and have the next conversation that I'm going to have? So it's like press and pause, taking a look at your internal state. And if you don't like what you see, just shifting it to something else.
Well, one of the things I do think is interesting too is performers are entrepreneurs, right?
course.
Mentalists, magicians,
Yeah.
also really entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
right? The business is you.
Yes.
How has being a mentalist helped you in your own business?
Well, you could be the greatest performer in the world, and if no one's ever heard of you, then you'll never work, right? And likewise, you can be like an okay performer, but really good at marketing, and you can work all the time. I mean, people probably have seen this in their own lives, whether it's a photographer or a DJ or a florist or any small business, right? It's not necessarily the person that's best at the thing that gets the most work. And so I realized very early on that if I wanted to be successful as a mentalist, that I probably should understand how to run a business. So I went to the University of Maryland. I went to the Robert H. Smith School of Business. I got a degree in business because I realized that if I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, this thing that I love, I should probably understand how to treat it as a business. So I think it was like being a performer that taught me about business, because I was lucky enough to have mentors very early on that were like, it's show business. It's not just the show, because mentalists and hypnotists focus so much on the performance, but then all of a sudden they've spent no time on marketing, on creating content, on building relationships in the real world, or living an interesting life, right? I mean, I think part of as a performer, what you bring to the stage is your life experience, your unique perspective. So yeah, what I've learned is that it's not just enough to be good at your craft. You also have to understand the way people make decisions, how they make buying decisions. You have to go out into the real world and make relationships, not just sit behind a computer. Um, yeah, and it's also taught me that I think there's a lot that a mentalist can teach people about themselves, not just in a business context, because it's great to go on stage in front of 10,000 people. And I do presentations where I teach how to take the tools of a mentalist and be more effective in sales. And that's awesome. And it does impact that person's life. But on an individual level, I think there's a realization that your thoughts create your reality. And I think if people realized that, it's liberating. You know, the amazing thing about having an experience of hypnosis is you can never take that experience back. For the rest of your life, you will have had a direct experience of the fact that your thoughts create your reality, which for many people changes their entire life, because I think so many people identify with their thoughts and they believe that they are their thoughts, and that if they think something, it's true. But the truth is that our thoughts aren't necessarily true. Oftentimes they're just noise. But because they're coming from inside of us, we believe them. Whether it's a story we've told ourselves for 20 years about who we are, or whether it's something somebody said to us 15 years ago that we repeat inside our own minds, we've adapted as our own belief. I think that, like, one of the things you realize as a mentalist and as a hypnotist is that our mind is a tool. And our thoughts oftentimes are just noise, and that we get to choose the thoughts that we have. No one else gets to decide what we think or what we believe. That only I get to decide how I feel. No one else has the power to decide how I feel. I don't give anyone that permission, right? And so that's really empowering to realize that my mind is a tool, and that just because I have a thought doesn't mean it's true. And on top of that, if I observe a thought, I can choose to think a new thought. You can wake up one day and change your entire life. How long does it take to change? People think it's a process. They think that I have to go on this journey of self-discovery. There's so much talk about processing. I'm processing my trauma. There is nothing to process. There's nothing to process. There's also nothing to forget. People say, I want to forget my past. Can I just forget that bad thing that happened to me? You actually don't want to do that, because if you forget the things that happened to you, you also lose the lesson. And the lesson is really important. And if you lose the lesson, then you're just going to have to repeat that same mistake to learn the lesson again. And so the beautiful thing is that in every moment of our life, we get to decide how we feel. We can decide one day that enough's enough, that we no longer want to be that way anymore. We don't want to talk to ourselves in that way. And that story that we've told ourselves for 20 years, it no longer serves us. It wasn't our idea to begin with, and it isn't even true. So if that's the case, then why not just wake up and change the program, to flip the script, to decide how we want to be, how we want to enter the world?
It makes me wonder, do you believe there's an objective reality?
I don't know. I think our thoughts certainly create a lens through which we view reality. I think that's undeniable. Yeah, you probably have a friend or someone you know in your life that is the type of person that always thinks, I'm so unlucky. Bad things always happen to me. Why is this happening again? Right? Or I can't believe this is happening again. And then you probably have another friend who's like, I'm so lucky. Good things are always happening to me. I can't believe this is happening again. Right? And it's just an identity that they've adopted. And it's a lens through which they choose to view the world. And if you believe you're unlucky, you'll look around and you'll see 100 things in a given day that go wrong. And if you believe you're lucky and that good things always happen to you, you might start to notice the good things that happen in your life. So most certainly our thoughts shift the lens through which we view the world. And the truth is that everything only ever happens inside of our mind. We don't experience anything directly, right? If I touch this table, that's just a signal that goes to my mind. I'm only experiencing that inside of my mind. So if everything only ever occurs inside of our head, then that's the only reality that matters. Because we can think about the past, about something that happened to us 20 years ago, and we can experience all of the pain and all of the frustration as if that's happening right now. Our body does not know the difference. It is experiencing it all over again, right? And then we relive that experience over and over again, and we're continuing to traumatize ourselves, to stress ourselves out, but it's not happening. But our brain doesn't know the difference between this beautiful day that you're having, looking up at the sun, and remembering the beautiful day that you had when you looked up at the sun and this beautiful view we have here in Aspen. So in a way, I guess reality is plastic. That's what I would say. It's moldable.
To wrap up, Arthur C. Clarke rules. Do you know the great Arthur C. Clarke rule?
No.
I'm paraphrasing, I believe, slightly.
Okay.
But the most advanced technology is indiscernible from magic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, that's true.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I have an understanding of the technology of the mind, and it looks a lot like magic. I can give you one final example if you want.
Please.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
Miami.
Miami. Where do you live now?
I live in New York.
New York. Okay. When did you leave Miami? Like, how old were you? About
18?
18 years old?
18.
Okay. So I want you to think back to your childhood, but let's go even further back than 18. I want you to go like pre-social media, okay? Because if you think about something that's too recent, people watching this are going to say, oh, he looked that up on the internet. So I want you to go back in your mind, Miami, you're a kid. I want you to think of a friend of yours that you lost touch with. And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean like someone who over the years you just kind of grew apart. And the reason I phrase it this way is because I don't want it to be something that I could look up on the internet or someone that you're still in touch with. Do you have a person in mind? You can open your eyes and look at me.
Yes. I was closing my eyes. I was ready.
What are the chances that I could find this out about you? Like that I could look this up? That is it something you posted? Is it a story that you've told before in an interview? Like this person you're thinking of, like what's the chances I could find this on the internet?
Effectively zero.
Right. And in this moment, you could think of anyone. So that makes the chances even more impossible. You ever have that experience in your life where you think of a person you haven't thought of in ages? Kind of the way you did just right now. And then out of the blue, you get an email from that person, or you run into them on the street, or you see them in the airport. And you're like, what are you doing here? I was just thinking of you. You've had that experience before, right?
Absolutely.
I want you to imagine you look past the cameras over here at this door, and in through that door walks this person from all those years ago. And can we bring him in there? No, that'd be crazy. That's not going to happen. They're not going to come in.
I was like,
you held your breath. You held your breath.
I was like, there's no way. Like, I know that's not happening, but there's no way.
Your producer's looking at me like, did we plan this? I don't know. No, but for a moment, you kind of held your breath, and I felt it. And it's that moment that emotion rises up and talk about that. And that's what I can connect to, is that emotion that you feel in that moment, because you wouldn't have been able to control yourself. You'd look over at the door and you would think, oh my gosh, and you'd want to shout the name.
Yeah.
You'd say, oh my gosh, and you'd shout the name, but nothing in your mind. Can I write on, do you have a card I can write on one of your cards or something?
Right on this.
Okay, perfect.
There you go.
Let's try this. Can I pick up?
Heck yeah, you can. You can do whatever you want.
Okay,
We're at the
perfect.
end.
At the end.
At
Just edit out
I
my-
didn't use any of them.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Trying to do this in a way that you can't like follow my pen and make out what I'm doing.
So you want it to be a real surprise. I actually believe you will succeed for what it's worth.
Can I show this camera? I want you to think about this. You went into your mind someone ages ago.
This is really off the hard drive. I want you to know. This is a person I have not thought about in a while.
What was the name that popped into your head?
Pablo? No way! I should text him. Okay, here we go. Okay, so right before we started recording, you sort of told me a version of this would be coming.
Yeah.
And I went into a corner with a Sharpie
Yeah.
and hid as I wrote this name
Yeah.
and crumpled it up. I hid in the corner, turned around. You were far away. There is no way you could have seen this. There is simply no way. So I don't know. What did this teach me about my mind?
That we all can be influenced and that we give far more away than we believe.
For what it's worth, I think a lot of us feel like we are such mysteries to ourselves and to other people, but people pay attention a lot.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
How much of reading people is pure intuition and how much of it is study?
It's all study in the beginning. But once I start performing, it's almost like a flow state. I don't know if I would call it intuition, but I'm not thinking. It's not an active process. So up front, the work that I do is very intentional and it's study. And maybe when you're first learning, you're in your head a lot because you're going, okay, I got to do this or that didn't work. I got to pivot a little bit. But after having done this for over 25 years now, I don't want to call it autopilot because it's not simple, but it's sort of a flow state that I go into and it just kind of happens. And after the fact, I could go back and break down for you what happened and what I was doing. But in the moment, I'm not thinking, especially when I'm on stage. There aren't any thoughts that go through my head. I'm just doing it. It's just coming through me. And that's the culmination of 25 years of practice. I mean, that's where the reps come in, I think. Yeah. Is there some part of me that's naturally good at this? Maybe.
But reps do make a difference.
Yeah.
One thing I say all the time is that I think everyone has a grand opera inside of them, and that people can be fathomless mysteries. But there is something comforting in the idea that we're not all that mysterious at all.
You said a grand opera inside of you. One of my favorite authors of all time, Wayne Dyer, said, "Don't die with your music in you."
Oh, that's actually really good advice,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Don't die with your music in you.
Thank
Share
you,
it with
Max.
the world.
So this is a very special episode of the Term Sheet Podcast. This is a departure from the norm. I spend my days interviewing folks who are founders, entrepreneurs, executives, often doing something or other with AI in this environment. And I'm interested in both the human behavior aspect of it, what AI's relationship to our human behavior is, and vice versa. But I also have a little bit of an insecurity about it because though I spend all of my time talking to people and reading people, ostensibly, I don't know if I'm any good at it. Can you be good at reading human behavior? What does that even mean?
Of course. Yeah, as a mentalist, I mean, I earn my living reading people on stage.
How did you know you were good at it?
Well, I practiced, and body language is entirely a skill that you can learn. It's something you can learn to read, and it's a skill that applies to everyone's life. At the same time, my experience as a hypnotist has taught me that human decisions can be shaped and ultimately can be influenced. And in many ways, the mind can be hijacked. And so I think there's a lot of application to what we're going to discuss today in the world of AI and entrepreneurship.
If there's one thing I can do right now to be better at reading human behavior, what is it?
Pay attention. I think most people are lost in their own thoughts. They're thinking about what they're going to say next, and they're not paying attention to the person that's sitting right in front of them. So, I mean, the first step to getting good at reading body language is to actually practice it. It's in every interaction that you have. Be nowhere else. Put your phone down and look at the person that's sitting in front of you. A really practical tool would just be to take a snapshot of that person before the interaction really begins. So at the beginning, establish a baseline of what is this person like before any negotiation starts, before I start selling. And then throughout the conversation, you now have observed a baseline and you can look for changes in that baseline, whether it's a change from closed posture to a more open posture or an open posture to a more closed off posture. And I think if you don't do that, you won't know if what you're seeing is a departure from that baseline. maybe they just naturally like to sit with their arms crossed. And if you didn't pay attention to how they were when the conversation started, you won't know if that piece of body language means anything in isolation. So, yeah, paying attention is the first step.
You taught AI to hypnotize. Can AI replace performers?
I don't know. I mean, AI can be entertaining for sure. Can it be an artist? Not yet, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody expected the internet to become what it is at this moment in time. I think art and storytelling it's you have to have had life experience in order to have an interesting perspective to tell an interesting story. And at this time, AI is not outliving its own life. It's not having experiences in the real world. And so I think it can replicate human emotion. It can create a story from scratch that might have happened, but it's that like lived human experience that creates great art. And right now, AI doesn't have a body and it's not out there living in the world. So I don't think it can. But in the next 20 years, I don't think any of us can predict what's going to happen.
Max, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was my interview with Max. It's really interesting. As I was listening back to this interview, I realized how much of it, even though we're talking about AI, we're talking about humans, how AI will affect us, what parts of AI can come across as human as opposed to not human. It was also making me think a lot about the thing I love maybe most about magic, which is that something can look completely real. It can be so persuasive. You know it's not real, but that doesn't deprive it of its power. And I think that's something that's really important to think about, especially as we spend more time with AI. That's it for Term Sheet. I'm Allie Garfinkle, and we'll see you soon.